Welcome to the Sister Girls Book Club podcast. I'm your host, Sharee. And first, Happy New Year. This is the first episode of 2026. And I'm so excited to be back with you for a new season. Our first guest is New York Times bestselling author Sadeqa Johnson. Yes, we got her in here, y'all. Her novel, The House of Eve, was an instant New York Times bestseller and Reese's Book Club pick, as well as an NAACP Image Award nominee, a Goodreads Choice Awards finalist, and a Target Book Club selection. She's not playing no games. Her previous novel, Yellow Wife, earned the Library of Virginia's Literary People's Choice Award and was also a Goodreads Choice Award finalist and Hurston Wright Foundation Legacy finalist and a BCALA Literary Award honoree and a Barnes& Noble Book Club pick, okay? She's joining us today to talk about her newest novel, Keeper of Lost Children. Sister Girls, if you love historical fiction, this is for you. If you've always wanted to read historical fiction, this interview is for you. Enjoy. Make sure you like, comment, and share this episode. Hey, everybody. I have with me Sadeqa Johnson. I am so excited to have you here. First of all, congratulations. I have the book, and the girls are talking. I mean, I'm excited. How do you feel that we're coming up upon the release and the world gets to have this book, Keeper of Lost Children?
I am. Well, thank you so much first for having me. It's really an honor and a pleasure to be here with you guys. So thank you for that. I am really excited about this book. I think it is my best book yet, or it feels like it. And I say that when I'm with my book, that's the book that, was the hardest. This is the one that I love the most until the next book. But really, no, this book was really the hardest. It was definitely a very ambitious go at historical fiction writing for me. It took me through all sorts of ups and downs. And, at one point while I was writing the novel, I thought to myself, okay, listen, you don't ever have to write another book. All you have to do is finish this one. That's it. Because it got me. Yeah.
All right. On a scale of 1 to 10, using your favorite song this year, it could be from any song, but this year that you've been listening to, how do you feel on a scale of 1 to 10, judging the song as the 10?
How do I feel? I'm at about an 8.5.
Okay. So what's the song that makes you at the 8.5?
Um, you know, to be honest, it's a lot of every day I'm hustling. Every day I'm hustling.
That makes
hustling,
sense. Oh,
hustling.
that makes sense. That makes sense. I love it. That makes sense. That's actually like right there. That's right there.
Yeah.
So you're at a great place. So this story, first of all, wow. I mean, I feel like when readers read this, they're gonna be on a journey that goes by too quickly. I feel like that's what happened. As soon as I got to there, I was like, what happens to this person, that person? So the story follows Sophia, Ethel, and Ozzie. What attracted you to tell this story and then to tell it from those three angles? Because we know the story of just like one historic story, but you chose to give it three angles.
Mhm. When I was working on House of Eve, which is my novel prior to Keeper of Lost Children, I
Mhm.
think I was away at a writer's retreat and I was doing some quick little Google research and I popped in orphans, I popped in maternity homes, I popped in unwanted children, and up popped this story about Mabel Grammer. And Mabel Grammer is the inspiration behind Keeper of Lost Children. She inspired the character of Ethel. And she was over in Germany. She was married to the chief warrant officer in the United States Army. And she discovered this orphanage filled with mixed race babies. And she decided in that moment that something needed to be done, that these children were American and they deserved to have mothers. She was unable to have children, and she and her husband adopt 12 children of their own. And she starts the Brown Baby Plan, which was a one woman adoption agency where she placed these brown children in US military families, but also here in America. And I thought, my goodness, this is a very ambitious woman. This is a shero in our history and American history. why did I not know anything about her?
Mhm.
And I'm always questioning, why didn't I learn this in history? How come I didn't learn this in social studies class? And so in that moment, I knew that her story deserved to be told. And so Ethel Gathers follows Mabel Grammer to the best of my ability, but it's also a lot of fiction and historical details. And then the next character that came to me was Ozzie
Mhm.
Phillips. I have a great uncle who's 93 years old,
Mhm.
and he was in the military during the Double V campaign,
Mhm.
where Black soldiers were over in Europe fighting for the freedom of other people. And they were like, well, we're home dealing with Jim Crow. Like, we don't have freedom, but we're fighting for other people. And I thought that's an angle of these War World II books that people don't
Mhm.
usually get to see. And so I
Mhm.
knew I wanted to write the Black male perspective of what it was like for them going over into Germany or anywhere in Europe, really, and having this sense of freedom that they
Mhm.
didn't feel at home. And he dates a German woman and he has, all of these experiences, but at the root, at the heart of him, he is a man who really just wants the best out of life and he wants to do the thing that's right. And then Sweet Sophia, I think I have a thing for writing girls, that coming
Mhm.
of age type of girl. You see it in The House of Eve. You saw
Mhm.
it in Yellow Wife, where, she wants something and there's all these things stacked against her. And so
Mhm.
Sophia lives on a farm in Southern Maryland. She's with a family, she's home with her family, and she just feels like she doesn't fit. They don't treat her well. And she's given this very rare opportunity to go to a prestigious boarding school on scholarship. And when she gets there, she realizes that all the things that she thought she knew were absolutely incorrect. And so these three stories sort of weave back and forth between each other. And there's all the things that pull them together, or maybe not. I don't want to ruin it,
Yeah.
at the center of the story.
Okay, and that's what I'm definitely going to try to do as we go through this conversation. So I'm gonna start with Ozzy. He frustrated me. Like I was so like frustrated. There were many times I felt like I was chastising him because I was like, he should know how this story is going to how it's going to end, how it plays out. When doing your research, did you find yourself having more understanding for the men in the service or the mothers or both? Like, how
Oh,
did your go into this?
I
Mhm.
had a understanding and empathy for both. For the Black American soldiers that went to these countries, they were young. Like, I don't know
Mhm.
if you have children, but just imagine an 18, 19, 20-year
Mhm.
old boy. My son is 22. And so I was thinking about him as I was writing the story, of like what that was like to be in these situations. And again, to have this new sense of freedom that they didn't have back here at home, and what that would look like and how that would play out in their lives. And so, yeah, that's what I was thinking about when I was writing Ozzy.
Yeah, and I'm still on Ozzy because I liked him. I liked him, and he was frustrating at the same time. So even though I did roll my eyes at him a lot, I didn't necessarily think about his pain as much as I thought about what he given up. So I was more focused on his future,
Mm.
right? Um, and then he gets into the military and he makes this sharp left turn, and it changes everything. Um, do you think that once people began to learn about the brown babies back then, they didn't focus on it so much, or that that's why we don't know about it because it was basically Black fathers and fatherhood, like, that would also have to be kinda exposed,
I
and it wasn't valued maybe
Yeah,
as
I
well?
always feel like when it comes to Black men in America, I feel like the Black man needs a publicist. I
Mhm.
just don't ever feel like America does him justice on the news, on television, on anything that you see. There's always this one-dimensional character, deadbeat dad in jail, gangbanger, and you never get the other side.
Mhm.
And so it was interesting. Now, again, don't forget this is historical fiction, right?
Yeah,
And so
yeah.
I had to look at what Black men lived in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s for this book.
Mhm.
And in my research, I found that oftentimes, they felt like second class citizens, right? We're still in Jim Crow era, even though the military was desegregated fairly early in the book. It didn't really dribble down to the men who were serving, not to the Black men who were serving. And so there was this complicated dance for them while they were abroad.
So, speaking of the writing and the research, when writing historical fiction, there's this undertaking of research. I'm just imagining, like, the amount of information you get. So how do you know when to begin Mabel Grammer's story and then when to create Ethel Gathers? Like how do you know when to like draw in the real historical narrative, and then it's like, okay, well now it's my turn to get like, to get your right on and be use your imagination.
I do all of my research for the most part up front. So
Hmm.
I'm reading, I'm watching YouTube videos, I'm watching videos. There's a really good video on Mabel Grammer and the Brown Baby Plan called Brown Babies, the Michelin Skinder story by Regina Griffith, which was the documentary. And so I spent a lot of time watching that documentary and other real accounts from Black men who were in the military during that time. And, I read a lot of books about this time period and I got a sense of what it was like for these brown children.
Hmm.
I front load all of that into my body, right? And then, so when I sit down to create the fiction, I have all the facts and I weave the facts in with the fiction based on what the story needs. I do try to stay as close to the facts as possible, but then
Hmm.
sometimes I have to bend it a little bit to make it fit, but I'm still being authentic to the true story.
I love that. And I think when trying to be authentic, it's funny because I looked up so much after this. I was like, oh, let's see like where was your imagination with the writing, and where was like how close was it to the truth? Because you can go through like a whole deep dive. And the story is amazing. Like just the woman alone all by herself. I thought that was interesting. So when writing this story, did you write each character's story as it unfolded to you, or did you keep the timelines of each character together? Because what readers will find out soon is that it's a little bit of a jump. So Sophia is like more to the future, not by much, but enough. And then you have Ethel and Ozzie who are close in time, but their characters go in back to back.
Mm-hmm. I didn't I don't know when I started the book if I knew that I was going to be working in three different time periods. I knew
Mhm,
that I had three different characters, so those characters came to me, and so I knew that there was their stories. It was just a matter of where the stories needed to start in order for
mhm,
the story to make sense all together. So when I was writing, I always started with Sophia. And so
mhm,
I would write Sophia's character for a couple of chapters till I was pretty much feeling like, okay, I have a sense of where she's going for like the next 3 or 4 chapters. And then I would put it aside. And then next I would write Ozzie's character for a couple of chapters. And then I would put him aside. And then I would do the same thing for Ethel. And then I printed all of that. And I would literally sit on my office floor and I lined up Sophia's chapters,
mhm.
Ozzie's chapters, Ethel's chapters, and I would pick them up almost like a jigsaw puzzle to figure out how they intersected with each other to sort of braid it together like a story. And I did that, time and time again until I got to the end of the book.
I like that. That's great because I was like, how is she not going to get like? How, I was sitting up here like, okay, what year are we in right now? Okay, we're back here, we're back there. Okay, so it was just so like interesting to see once everybody started to connect at the same time what was happening, and it eased in there. It didn't feel too time jumpy. Like we were in like, okay, now we're in the future. So it eased so well into like when everybody was able to like sync. Sophia was my favorite character if I had to choose one, because she
Mhm.
forged ahead no matter what. And I think that's what it was. It was like she was never going to give up. A 16-year-old tasked to lead like desegregation in like a white high school, but not like a privileged white high school. That's no small task. So I know she felt alone a lot, even with friends. But you
Mhm.
gave her what I call silent heroes. That comes in the form of Miss Peaches, the librarian, the coach, Ethel, and her village. It starts to form without maybe her even recognizing it until maybe when she acknowledges it. Did
Mhm.
you know that's what you were creating, or did you just write it like yourself and they just happened to come? Because Black people will find each other no matter what.
I started off knowing a few things about Sophia. I knew, that she needed to be, a fighter, that she was going to go against whatever people were throwing at her. She was going to keep coming because, again, that's the character that I love to write. But when she got to the boarding school, the what I was researching, and that was a timeline, or that was a part of her story that came as I was working her character out, because
Mhm,
as I was researching boarding schools and private schools, I realized that board versus education did not count in that sector. That was only for public schools, right? And so that was 53, 54. But these elite schools didn't really start integrating until 64, 5, 6, 7, 8 in some
Mhm.
cases. And I did this deep dive on school integration on a higher level, not only the private boarding school and private day school sector, but I also start looking at some of the big universities like Ole
Yeah.
Miss and LSU, and I was reading accounts about what it was like for those first few students that were, there alone, and it tore me up. And I
Mhm.
thought, we don't talk about this enough. And I think as a historical fiction writer, my goal is always to go and find that gem in history and kind of
Mhm.
bring it to light and to remind us that, one, we've come really far, right? We've come really, really far. Yes, we still have a lot of work ahead of us to do, but like this is what, to a generation or two ago went through. And it's
Mhm.
important for us not to forget. And so the school part was really important to me.
Yeah, I think that actually like humanized it in a way where you just felt yourself sitting there. Cause I think Ethel, I love her character, but she seems like a saint. She almost seems like she's not even real. It's like, how could someone have this much time, the energy, and just knowing that she was, because even if you had to do that in this time right now, it would be super duper hard. But she had, prestige and stuff just because of who she knew, where she was at, but it just seemed like she was a super angel. Whereas with Sophia, it was just like she was trying so hard to just do her best. And she was
Yeah.
just trying to get to the next step. So with Ethel, knowing all you found out about the real life person, how did
Mhm.
you know how did you decide which parts of her life to hone into to keep her as like a historical figure? But then there was so much, like she worked with Thurgood Marshall, she worked with the first lady, like she did so much with her life. And I'm
Yeah.
just like, you could have included this, you could have excluded. How do you even put a life like that in,
Yeah.
character?
Well, sometimes I've written all of that in, and then some of it will come out in the edits because sometimes it's too much. So
Mhm.
I know that I think I did keep the fact that she worked with Thurgood Marshall, but maybe I had written a longer scene about it. But in the
Mhm.
story, it's just conversation real quick. I think Julia
Yeah.
says, "Did you work with
Mhm.
Thurgood?" And so
Mhm.
whereas like that's like a little drop in the
Mhm.
story, but really I probably maybe have written a longer scene with more details,
Mhm.
and everything that I write in that first and second draft doesn't always make it into the final draft. But
Mhm.
sometimes I need to sort of overwrite in order to take the spray of that writing and sprinkle it into a shorter way of describing it, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
And then you still get the essence of it. So um, I learned a lot about Mabel Grammer through her own writing. She was a journalist. And so I
Mhm.
was able to find archival newspaper articles that she had written and that was written about her. And I read those and I was able to kind of get her voice and her sense. And the tough part for me was that everything that I read about Mabel Grammer, she was so good. She
It was
was
like she was a
so
saint.
good. She was so good. And I think at one point, Julia makes fun of her in the story about
Mhm.
how good she is. And I didn't want to take that away from her. We need good heroes. I didn't want to take that away from her. And so I did try to stay as true to that as possible. But I also knew that when the story came to me, just writing it from the perspective of Ethel Gathers, who was inspired by Mabel Grammer, wouldn't
Mhm.
have been enough to sustain a whole book. Hence why
Yeah.
we have the other two characters.
I totally understand, and I agree because other characters like move it along in a way that you get to see it and how this one thing can affect generations and
Yeah.
each life at the same time. And I thought that was actually necessary because, like you said, how we just heard Ethel's story, we wouldn't have seen the impact on Ozzie. We wouldn't have seen the impact on Sophia of one decision.
Yeah.
Now, one thing I will say is Bert was a dream come true. Her Once people read the story, I know people was going to ask because I was like, why was he so like I had to research her husband to make sure. I'm like, this seems like it could be like maybe a little false or like maybe this was the fiction part. I was like, oh no, you actually played it down because it
Yeah.
goes from 0 to 8. And the real story is a little bit more. I'm not going to give away what 0 to 8 means, but
Yeah.
we didn't even bat an eye. I was like, wait, what?
Yeah. Yeah. The two of them together, I have a picture that I had of them on my wall when I was writing, and they just looked so like good-hearted, good-natured,
Mhm.
will do anything for you, service people,
Mhm.
and he had a military background, so he was a man of service. And I try to stay as close to what I knew about him as possible.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, like I said, they're gonna be like, "Oh, he's a dream. Is he for real?" And then they're gonna look him up, like, "Yes, he did. He sure did." So sisterhood was very important. Like Ethel and Julia's relationship was amazing. She reminded me of my best friend. And then we have Sophia and Willa's relationship. So how did you work, like, first of all, how, what are your views on sisterhood, and then also how did you manage it, because you were dealing with like adult sisterhood and then like youth sisterhood, like the first friend and finding like that trust, and when things happen and betrayal, and then you're dealing with adult friendship where it's like husbands and wives, and like even racism, and having to have each other's back in both situations. So how are you able to navigate that?
I think it came natural. It wasn't anything that I really thought too seriously about. The characters and their friendship sort of drifted towards each other. I think in Ethel's story, I I had two friends for her to start, and then one of the friends, as I was writing it, just didn't. She didn't stay with the story. Like I can tell when I'm forcing a character to be, as opposed to the character just being right. And so
Mhm.
Julia was more of a natural fit, which the third character that I was trying to work in was making it a little too complicated because I wanted to make them like a little threesome, and that
Mm.
wasn't working. And so I have to honor the story and the characters.
Mhm.
Sometimes my plan is not the best plan. They will tell me when I'm doing too much. And I felt like in that sense that happened. But the friendship sort of happened pretty natural for me as I was writing the book.
So one thing that I kept like rolling over in my mind throughout the entire time reading the book was the black, like, what is the black family? And because I know how many play cousins, I run out of fingers, how many play aunties, and how many play this person. And then I thought, start thinking about it, and I'm just like, they go along with the 5011 real cousins and aunties and everybody else. And so I wonder, do you believe it's nature versus nurture, the way Black people find ourselves with each other over and over again in every lifetime, right? Because just when I've read even your books like Yellow Wife and The House of Eve, like that family that's not actual blood, it always pops up. And then I think of my real life, and then of course we think of history. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I always tell my kids everything goes back to slavery and Stevie
Yeah, of
Wonder.
course. Hmm.
And so when during enslaved times, family was who was on your plantation. It didn't have to be, there wasn't going to be a child that didn't have a mother because their mother was sold away. That auntie was going to come and take care of that child. And that is where we come from. And so I think that that's how we built community. I have lived in three different places as an adult, and in each place I built community, and I could always go back to those communities, and they're looking after my children, and they care about me, and they love me.
Hmm.
And so it's something that I think we all know, right? It's like part of our being is to be in community with family, but also friends who are our aunties too, as well.
Hmm. Yeah, I love that, because that was one thing I'm like, dang, everybody got a play cousin, a play sister, a play this. Um, but then it's a little bit sad too because of the way we had to create that. I think that was the one thing that I felt like, well, maybe the reason why we didn't know these stories was because it would showcase the Black family as a very strong unit, so strong that they would actually adopt other Black babies that were not even from the country. Like that's a different display of Black family strength and unity. And so I sometimes wonder if that's why, that's not in a textbook, or that's not something that we just know about.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, that was just like a random thought. So of all the characters, who did you have an affinity for when writing?
Um, it It really depended. I mean, I really felt deeply for Ozzie. I felt like he came to me very formed. I grew up in Philadelphia, so um, House of Eve takes place in North Philadelphia, where my mother is from. My dad's from South Philly, so it was very satisfying for me to go into South Philly and write about the places that I knew it in my childhood, but also that I knew my dad, the streets he walked, and that sort of thing. And so Ozzie was, he came pretty fully formed. I love all of the different dynamics in his story. He's complicated. And we are, and Black men are complicated. And so I didn't want him to be cookie cutter. Like, you know, when you look at Ozzie and you look at William from the House of Eve, they are completely and utterly different. Right. And so that was important for me to really be able to show the nucleus of a man like him and the ups and downs and be honest. Right. Because some of the things that he went through, we know in our community that happens. Right. We know where, you know, people fall and they spiral down without giving too much away. And then you're looking like, what's wrong with Uncle Leon? Why he acting like that? You know what I mean? And so I wanted to be able to give the full breadth of who he was. But Sophia, you know, her story, again, I love that young girl who just is not going to take no for an answer. And so she definitely was near to me. I would say Ethel was the hardest character for me to write. You know, whenever I'm writing something inspired by someone, sometimes it chokes me up a little bit because I'm trying to get the details so right that I don't have that creative freedom to like breathe into it. So, yeah.
There was one person I was waiting on, and I found her because I was waiting on. I was like, "How is it possible we haven't met her yet?" Ozzie's friend that he meets, and she's a nurse, and she's
Clara.
a Black woman, Clara. Yes, I was like, "Where is her? Where is this Black woman's point of view? Who's watching all this unfold?" And I was, as soon as she came, I was like, oh, "Okay, like here we have her," because that was the point of view I was waiting for, and I wonder how we're like our generation, like when we read this book, because I'm a millennial, when we read it now, what are going to be our thoughts in juxtaposition of how Ozzie is portrayed and how they feel about Ozzie from a contemporary standpoint, looking at historical fiction, fictional character, because of like race relations and even like the Black woman and how she had to view that. Like she's
Yeah.
over there helping you, nursing you back to health, and she's witnessing all of
Yeah.
this unfold. And she
Well,
even warned him.
yeah, that's why that scene that we're not going to talk about when they see
Yeah, I'm not gonna go.
was important to me. That cafe scene in Germany when they see each other, that was really important to me because I feel like I was voicing what Black women think, like, you know, and so that was really important for me to say.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's going to be an interesting. Like, I'm waiting to hear the feedback when people start reading it.
That'll be a nice pull for book clubs to sort of talk about and dissect, right?
Yeah, that is because I'm like, when I was reading, I was like, where is the woman who's going to just happen to say something or happen to have an opinion? But yeah, she came right on time. And she did it in like a very cool way too. It wasn't where you wanted to like be angry. She was just like, I hope you know, dot, dot, dot. One thing that you have done like extremely well, so much so because I read all the novels prior, I was waiting. I was like, okay, which character are we gonna see? Because you have tied Yellow Wife into the House of Eve, and now we see our homegirl and keeper of lost children. And I was waiting. As soon as I heard Miss Pride was on the block, I said, "Oh no!" And in my head, that is Felicia Rashad. Every time I think of a super wealthy Black woman who can play a villain or even like a nice person, is always Felicia Rashad. And I was like, "Oh, here she is!" And I just thought it was so fascinating because you have Willa, rambunctious girl, excited girl, and then we realized who her mother is, and I was just like, "Girl, if you only knew."
Which we're not gonna say because we're not gonna.
I'm not gonna say that, but like I said, Miss Pride comes up, okay. And so, are you doing that on purpose, or does it just? Are you doing it because it's historical fiction and you can keep pulling these people back in, or are you doing it just because you like it?
For you guys. I do it for you guys because people always ask me for a sequel, right? Yellow Wife. Can I have a sequel to Yellow Wife? House of Eve. Are you writing the sequel? I feel like there's still so much to pull. And so instead of writing a sequel, I just give you some Easter eggs in the next book to satisfy you.
That wasn't no Easter egg. That was a bomb. I said, the whole time I was like, "Oh, this is wild," but people they're gonna love it. They're gonna, because I literally said, and I stopped in my truck and said, "I know this ain't who I think it is." And even when I started putting together like will just everybody together. And I was like, oh yeah, this is interesting. Okay,
Mhm.
so there's a trend when people were asked on TikTok if they could go back to any time period, which one would they choose? White people had the benefit of choosing anytime they wanted. They would go back to like all types of like times. And for black people, the time machines question wouldn't be like our first mode of transportation, maybe the future, but I don't know so much the past. So when you find these stories like Yellow Wife, House of Eve, and Keeper of the Lost Children, well, Brown Babies, what makes you want to keep going back in time? Because we all know that it's so much sadness that even with all the triumph and things that we overcome, it is so much sadness. And how do you get through it as a writer and researcher?
I go back because we have to remember.
Hmm.
We have to remember from whence we came. And if we don't, then we keep doing the same things over and over again. Or, when our government is when our government is sort of trying to push us back, it's like
Hmm.
we need to know what that was like before so we can understand that this is where we are now, right? And so I think it's important for us to remember. I think it's important for us to continue to give a voice to those who did not have a voice. That's what I do as a historical fiction writer, is to do that. But I think in order to know where you're going, you got to know where you're coming from. And so as painful it is as it is, particularly for, the most painful book that I wrote was Yellow Wife.
Hmm.
I live in antebellum slavery for 2 years
Mm.
where I was completely submersed. I was reading books, I was watching things on television. I'm on the beach reading The Incident in the Life of a Slave Girl, and the person next to me is reading like, Emily Henry. It's
Hmm.
not the same thing. And so, but I did it because if not me, then who? And if we
Hmm.
don't keep our stories and our history alive, and then it'll just be gone. And so I feel a calling to do this.
I love that. And I think it pours itself out in every story that you tell. You keep saying that this one is the best one. I don't know which one is the best one. I just say they're all really, really good. But this story right here, it's going to have people talking. I know that much. So my last wrap up is around the flash questions. And it's the first thought you have on your head and you just spit it out. So writing in the morning or writing at night?
Morning.
Paperback or ebook?
Paperback.
Comedy or a thriller?
Drama. I'll go comedy. I'll go comedy.
Living single or insecure?
Ooh. Living Single is more my age group. And I did start Insecure and I never finished it. And it's my like 18-year-old's favorite show ever. Like she wants to grow up and be Issa Rae.
That's so funny. Okay, so Malcolm X or Martin Luther King Jr.?
Oh, I'm gonna go Malcolm X. I feel like that brother don't get enough love.
Okay. I hope you know this because I had only one person didn't get the thing. Is it Uchi Wally or is it One Mike?
Ooh, one mic.
Okay. and, and lastly, who is Sadeqa Johnson?
She is a mother, first and foremost, a wife, an author, an avid lover of outdoors and nature. I love to travel. I love to hike. I love to move my body.
Mhm.
Yeah.
All right. And tell the people where they can find you and your
Yeah.
work, obviously.
Absolutely. So you can find me on Instagram at Sadeqa Says. Please, please, please follow me, follow me, follow me. And I'm also, my website is www.sadeqa.net. And I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter, but not really. It's not even called Twitter anymore. Just Instagram and my website is plenty. A little bit of Facebook, yes.
All right, thank you, and I wish you nothing but the best. I know this you hit it out the park, so I cannot wait until readers are talking and I can actually tell more about the book and we can have those
Yes.
conversations. So thank you so much, and like I said, blessings to you and everything.